The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone to our webinar, How to Improve Cold Calling Efficiency and Results, presented by Michael Wentworth, President of TMR Associates. My name is Ryan Kauth and I will be your host today. I direct the Wisconsin Small Business Development Center at UW Green Bay. The Small Business Development Center provides no-cost small business growth planning services and low-cost small business leadership training. Our website is www.uwgb.edu/SBDC, and you can also engage us via email at sbdc@uwgb.edu. We also have a YouTube channel and Twitter. This webinar is the first in a series of 7 webinars we call our Secrets to Success series, designed to help small business owners increase their financial success. We will feature one webinar topic each month from now through the end of the year. At the conclusion of this webinar, we will share the upcoming topics, and we encourage you to consider attending. Now I'd like to thank our partner for the Secret of Success webinar series. Mickey Noon is the president of the Northeast region for First Business Bank, and Tim Bino is the market president in Green Bay. And I'd just like to thank them again for partnering with us with this webinar series. If after this series you have any questions for Mickey or Tim related to small business banking and small business success, please email the SBDC and I'll get them in contact with you. During the webinar, you're invited to ask questions at any time. Please use the menu along the right side of your screen. Type your question and hit enter. As soon as our presenter, Michael, sees it, he will respond. If he doesn't respond during the presentation, we will cover it during the discussion portion at the end of the webinar. And again, following the webinar, you will receive an email with a link to a recording of the webinar. And now, I'm very pleased to introduce our expert presenter, Michael Wentworth, President of TMR Associates. Michael?
Thanks, Ryan, and thank you to First Business Bank for sponsoring this series. It's a pleasure to be part of it. TMR Associates is a firm that does B2B appointment setting, customer interviews, qualitative phone interviews that is, and cold call training. So our specialty really is we know how to pick up the phone and call people we don't know and have deep conversations with them. Let me tell you a little bit about cold calling today. In today's business world, picking up the phone remains one of the best ways to reach an organization's senior executives. That was recently published in Inc. magazine. Study they conducted showed that almost 50% of buyers will give preference to cold callers. In other words, if you call in and introduce your firm, 50% of the people you talk to will give you preference over anyone else. That's pretty powerful. Now, I've got some rules about cold calling today that I've established over the time, that we've gathered data, which is quite a while. I think we've scheduled over 1,000 appointments for different companies and made many thousands of phone calls. Rule number 1, you can't sell on the phone. The days of being able to call up and have long conversations over their phone and make a sales pitch on the phone really aren't happening today because most people are way too busy to be able to be interrupted and then spend time on the phone. Rule number 2, you can schedule an appointment. Now, in deference to rule number 1, you can schedule a phone appointment, which can work, but typically people like to do face-to-face. That's where the most power is. Rule number 3, no one has time for a non-essential meeting. This is a very important factor, and it will come up again as we go through the webinar today. But one of the things that you have to remember is that if someone agrees to meet with you, they believe that what you're offering them might solve a problem for them. So how to make it work? Well, you need to create a 15-second message that will engage your prospect. Number 2, you need to create a list that doesn't waste your time. Number 3, you need to find time every day to make cold calls. And again, this is tough for everybody. And number 4, you need to track your efforts so you can forecast results. These are the things that are really critical to being successful with cold calling today. So let's take a look at 15-second message. The components of this are you have to have a common description of your business. This is generic, broad, and very recognizable. You have to have a high priority job that you do. And then you ask for the appointment. So it consists of 3 statements. I do this. I specialize in doing this kind of work. Can we meet? Now, how do you find out where you need to focus? That's one of the challenging things for many businesses. In other words, what's the high priority job that your prospects need you to do? And who do you need to be talking to? Well, if you talk to your customers, you can learn that pretty well. But here's what you got to ask them. Ask them, what job did they originally hire you to do? And this is a question that most folks just don't ask their customers. What they end up asking them is, what do you like about doing business with me? They ask them about the experience of doing business with them. And that's great. But people who've never done business with you don't understand what that experience is and don't know how to relate to it. So what you have to do, you go back to your customers and say, what job did they originally hire you to do? Because that was a high priority job for them. Believe me, because if they get their checkbook out, it's a priority. Second, why did they choose you to do it? If you learn those things, you can fill in the blanks above. So let's take a look at some of the components. What is your business? It needs to be simple, it needs to be recognizable, and it needs to be broad and high level. Dan Rome is a psychologist who wrote a wonderful little book called The Back of the Napkin. I highly recommend you pick it up, not because it teaches you how to draw nice little simple pictures and tell stories, because Dan tells you how people receive information. And he also explains how people can get turned off real fast if you present the information incorrectly. And one of the fundamental covenants of his psychology is the information has to be recognizable. All of us as human beings embrace things we recognize and repel things we don't recognize. And it goes back to the very beginning of branding and positioning. But really it's all about recognition. Second, the other thing is, he says it has to be simple. So when you're describing your business, it has to be simple and it has to be recognizable. Otherwise, you'll never engage somebody who's startled into a conversation by your cold call. So here's some examples. For my firm, TMR, B2B appointment setting. Now, I think to some of you, you might say, okay, but boy, that doesn't seem very special. It's not meant to be. It's just get their attention. Performa, architects and engineers. Joseph A. Interiors, commercial millwork. Pathmakers, leadership development. You can tell these are all very generic descriptors, high level, but they're very recognizable if you're talking to the right buyer. So when you cold call, they answer the phone, they don't know who you are, they don't know what's going on, but they know one thing, you interrupted their day. So get to the point. If you say to them, we're architects and engineers, and they're a plant manager and they hire architects and engineers, at least they know who you are, and in their brain, they move to that position and they say, okay, I'm ready to receive information. The next thing you have to do is say, what's the high priority job you do? Now, Theodore Levitt is a famous Harvard business professor who said no one buys a 3/4 inch drill. They buy a 3/4 inch hole. And what that means is no one buys your product or service. Regardless of how special you folks are, no one buys that. What they buy is what it does. So you need to be very focused on a high priority job that you do. And here's the characteristics. It has to be common to many. In other words, it has to be a priority job that many of your prospects are struggling with. 2, it has to be tactical and specific. And this is the thing that many companies struggle with. If you're in the insurance business, you might say, well, we're a global insurance company that provides over 1,000 different types of policies. That's the way most people like to talk about their business. But it's so big and so undefinable that no one really knows why they would hire that company, other than the fact that they're enormous. And that's not really why we hire. So getting people to zero in on, we specialize in this, and it has to be very focused. Now, to those folks that say, yeah, but then they won't buy any of the other stuff I have, and I got so much to sell and so much of a story, don't worry about it. This is just a door opener. It just gets your foot in the door. And then finally, the job has to be critical. It has to be burning a hole in the prospect's desk. And they've got a job on their desk, their boss is in their face, when is this going to get done? And you arrive on the scene and say, we specialize in doing this. That's when they're ready to see you. So here's some examples. For me, B2B appointment setting, the high priority job was we schedule introductory sales appointments with new prospects. Obviously, you folks are on this call because that's something that is important to you. Well, many, many, many companies, after we did research, said the hardest thing they have to do in the sales environment is get anybody to schedule an introductory sales appointment with a new prospect. So that becomes a high priority job. Architects and engineers, in this case, increase cheese production without increasing square footage. Now, they were calling cheese plants. They were talking to the plant manager, and the job that they specialized in, think about this, architects and engineers, they build everything from prisons to colleges. And we were saying, we specialize in increasing cheese production without increasing square footage. That is so focused and so powerful to the cheese plants, it was very effective. Commercial millwork. We specialize in millwork projects with the most demanding fit and finish and schedules. In the world of construction, commercial millwork companies tend to be artisans. And this drives general contractors crazy because they get bogged down with work, they're not the best managers of schedules, and they get behind. And commercial contractors can't have that happen. The millwork's got to show up at the right time because they got people hired to do the work when they're there. And so we position this company to say we specialize in the most demanding projects. And again, that got everybody's attention. Then finally, leadership development. Supporting existing leadership development programs with individual executive coaching. In this particular case, the targets they were going after, the companies had leadership development programs in place. They didn't need to be taught that they needed them. But what they were looking for was someone who could help them with individual executive coaching in concert with their programs. And that's how we came to this conclusion. Very effective, by the way. And then finally, you need to ask for the appointment. This consists of, it's only an introduction. You're not coming there to sell them anything. It's not a sales call. You're just coming in to shake hands face to face. So the language might be, I'm going to be in your area the week of July 22nd and was wondering if you might have a few minutes sometime that week that I could stop in and just introduce myself. Very low threat. If the person is attracted to what your business is, B2B appointment setting, he's attracted to the high priority job because that's something he needs to get done, which is, I got to meet with new prospects. Yep, that's a challenge of mine. I got to do that. And this guy is going to be in my area. Okay, I can make some time just to meet this guy. Now, here's the thing that's interesting. A lot of you might be saying, yeah, but Michael, how do you qualify these guys? These guys don't sound like they're very qualified. Sounds like you're going to meet with somebody, but how do we know they're buyers? Well, remember one thing. No one has time for a non-essential meeting. Now, remember what we were talking about. You're going to tell them the business you're in, B2B appointment setting. You're going to tell them the high priority job you do. We put you in front of new prospects. and we're going to be in your area. If they make time for you, it's because that job you say you do is something they need done. They're not sure you can do it for them, but they need it done. So our qualification rate is significantly higher in quality using these methodologies than traditional industry examples. For example, just to kind of give you a sense, in the industry, the average is 10 to 15% of the appointments scheduled by firms like mine end up becoming sales opportunities. Our experience with our clients is it's 50 to 60%. That's a remarkably higher rate of return for our clients, and they're very ecstatic about that. And yet, we're asking fewer qualification questions than most of our competitors. The difference is we're aligning ourselves and our clients with the priorities of the prospect. And as a result, we're getting better alignment, and we don't have to go into long qualifications. Much more effective approach. Now, you've got the message. You know who you need to talk to. You know what you need to say. So you need to create a good list. That means establishing the criteria, identifying the companies that qualify, and deciding whether you're going after the headquarters of the company or whether you're going after individual locations or plants. And then you need to verify your contact. So establish criteria. Now, these are very common things. You sit down and you say, what's the geography that we're going to go after? What kind of product or services do our prospects need to be in the business of selling? What market sector or industries are they in? How big are they? Who are their customers? What sales channels do they use? All of these things, or maybe just some of these things, may apply to building your criteria. Next, you need to get a list. Now, one of the things that I highly recommend to people is I have spent money on Hoovers. I've spent money on OneSource, Jigsaw, Sales Genie. I mean, you name it. They're all over the place, and they say, we've got the best lists on the planet. Turns out that anyone can get you a list of companies. Brown County Library, great resource. Turns out they have an area on their website called Research Tools and Downloadable Media. You go there and you're going to find this link, A to Z Databases. It's free. You go there, you set up your criteria. What geography are you targeting? What keywords, including SIC codes or NAICS codes? That's just terrible. Anyway, the executives that you're going after, business size, phone, fax, other things, they also have options around ownership and other important criteria. You set up your search, you get a list of companies. And it's free. Folks, don't spend money on lists. Really, it is a waste of money. Brown County Library, get a library card, it'll be fine. If you don't live in Green Bay, I'm sure your local library has very similar kinds of things. Now, after that, you have to identify where you're going, because in these lists, you're only going to get, most of the time, the headquarters. Sometimes you might get branch locations, but most of the time you're going to get the primary location. So you have to find those plants. One of the ways to do that is go on Manta. Again, it's free. We're using Schreiber Foods as an example. We put Schreiber Foods in Manta and look at all these branch locations. So now you learn where they are. Now you don't know what they look like, but you open them up and it comes in there and it says, okay, is a private company categorized under cheese processors? It doesn't tell you everything about the company, but it gives you enough so you know that, okay, it's worth a call. And the magic thing is it gives you a contact. Turns out that Manta is about 80% accurate with its staff when it has a listing. So it's far more accurate than any of the other lists that I've purchased in the past and spent a lot more money on. And it's free. Just a little bit of work, you can nail the person. Now, the final thing is you got the person's name, but you don't know whether they really work there. Go to LinkedIn. Go to social media. Find the person. It'll verify that they're there. It'll verify that they're in the position they're in and where they're located and everything else. Now, this may seem like a little bit of a cumbersome thing to do, but it's really important to your calling, because if you get a really good list, 5 or 6 phone calls and you're going to have an appointment. Really bad list, 40 or 50 calls and you're going to get an appointment. So it's all about time and money. I find it works better if you do this on the front end. So how to find time to call? Well, as I was mentioning, let's take a look at the real numbers, not the fictional numbers, which is the boss says, hey, make some cold calls. Everybody's got time to make cold calls. Just sit down right now. I mean, you can make 100 calls in 15 minutes. I've had many bosses tell me that. Well, here's the reality. 30 to 60 calls is what it takes on average to get an appointment. Now, if you do some really good list work, you might be able to get appointments with fewer calls. And, you know, I will tell you that I have had it work where I've made 2 calls and gotten an appointment. I've had it be a situation where I've made 40 calls and gotten an appointment. But by and large, if I do the list research, I find that I'm well within the 15 to 20 call number to get an appointment. And that's manageable. Because here's the reality. 2 to 3 hours of calling is what's required to get an appointment based on those number of calls. And, you know, so that's really important. Looks like I got an indication that my audio was lost there for a second. I hope I'm back on. Looks like everything's okay. So the point is, when you're making phone calls, it takes time, a lot of time. Don't let anyone tell you it doesn't. So it takes commitment. So let's look at when you can do this, because I don't know about you, but I don't have a lot of time during the day to sit down and make cold calls. Even though it's my business, it's hard to find that time because I run this business as well as do some of the work. Well, here are some of the times that are low-hanging fruit. First thing in the morning, 8 to 9 a.m. Most of us waste that time. We don't really do anything with it. That's a great time to make calls. Lunch hour, noon to 1. You'd be amazed at how many people are available from noon to 1 because they're working at their desk. They're eating at their desk instead of going out to lunch. And those are the kinds of people you really want to talk to, and they really appreciate talking to you. And then finally, at the end of the day, 4 to 5. Now, one of the fallacies of cold calling is nobody's available on Monday morning, so I don't call on Monday morning. Nobody's going to answer the phone. Truth is, that's a lie. You'll find that more people are available on Monday morning, perhaps, than many other times, because they're sitting at their desk getting themselves organized for the week. They're available. Same thing with the end of the day Friday. I find that if I call between 4 and 5 on Friday, I have some of the best conversations that I have with anyone that's out there. And the reason is the real workers, the real decision makers, the real people that are the kinds of people you want to meet with are working hard from 4 to 5. They haven't bailed. They haven't gone home. So these are magic hours. There's 3 hours I've given you of calling that you can squeeze in every day that I bet right now is pretty unproductive time. And then finally, you need to track this. And the reason you need to track it is you need to make the process of cold calling predictable. I can't tell you how many people I sit down with and say cold calling doesn't work, it's a crapshoot, it's the lottery, I don't know. You know, they don't treat it like a process, and it is a process. And if you have data, you can show people how it's a process. So here's what you need to track. Track the number of calls you make. Track the time you spend calling. Track the number of appointments you schedule. And then after that, track the time from the appointment to an actual transaction and what's the total revenue generated. So that across the spreadsheet, you can look at it and say, okay, it takes me X number of calls to get an appointment, and that equates to X amount of hours. And once I have that initial appointment, it's 3 months to a transaction. And the average transaction size is $15,000. Now you've got something you can sit down with a CEO or with your boss and say, this is what it's worth to us for me to cold call. Very, very powerful. So in summary, folks, you need a 15-second message because that's all you've got in today's environment. And I challenge anyone to pick up the phone and call and find out if they got more than that time. Second, you need a good list. That'll save you a lot of time but you don't have to pay for it. It's available to you. Just do a little bit of research. You need to block out time to do it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I mean by that. Turn off your computer, turn off your email, turn off all kinds of inputs that can distract you. Isolate yourself, lock your door, leave the building, do whatever you got to do so you don't get interrupted, but sit down and just do the calling. And then finally, you need to track it so that you can establish data so that you can share with others the predictable results you can deliver when you concentrate on cold calling. So I've been talking for a little bit of time, and I've shared a lot of information with you. And as we mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, there's a little box in the lower right-hand corner of your menu. Please use that to ask a question. Let's see here. I think I've got my first question. This one's from Jim. He's saying, it seems like the list work could be a good thing to have even after the cold calling is done. Is that correct? Absolutely. You know, one of the things I didn't talk about, which I highly recommend you do, is take a look at the company's websites. You know, and you might say to me, well, you know, we're going to create a list. I don't have time to sit down and look at the website. You'd be amazed. If you spend just a minute qualifying the website and looking through it, you'll learn very quickly whether it's even a company you want to talk to. And if it is, you'll learn specifically how you want to approach them. So it's a great question, Jim. Anyone else got a question? Nope, nothing yet. I hope everybody can see that box and use it. You know, some of the things that came up on Tuesday when we did this webinar had to do with, you know, finding time. One gentleman even said, you know, have you ever thought about leaving the building to do this kind of work? And I explained to him that, you know, in one of my former iterations doing cold calling, I actually went out and sat in the car in the parking lot and made phone calls because I knew nobody could get to me out there. So you know, it's the concept of isolating yourself and making sure you do it. The other thing that came up was, you know, how to discipline yourself. And I do this for a living, and I still have problems motivating myself to do cold calling when I should. And as I mentioned on Tuesday, it's like, you know, going to the gym. If you can just get yourself in the car and get to the gym, everything takes care of itself, but it's just getting there that's so hard. And you just got to make that decision that you're going to do it. Any other questions, folks? Phyllis has a question. Which is better to call, first or send email or brochure? Well, I'll tell you something. When you send something unsolicited, it really doesn't get any attention. Now, there will be people that say, I like to send a letter first and then do a follow-up call. Well, I've tried that strategy, Phyllis, and 9 times out of 10 when I do it and make those phone calls, the people have never seen what I sent them. They take my call and I have something to talk about, but they never saw what I sent them. And so it's really not worth it. I had a client down in Milwaukee say to me, well, we're going to send out these emails with this letter and everything else, or this regular letter we're going to send out, and then you follow up on the letter. And I just told them, don't waste your time. Let us just cold call. We were far more effective for them just calling in. And one of the things that we keep on file is, when we're doing this work, is a response email that has more information. One of the things I recommend you have is an email that is all text rather than an attachment. People are resistant to open attachments from people they don't know, even though they've talked to you. Put all the content about your story in your email text and send that to them when you call them and say, could you just send me some more information? We find that works more effectively. Any more questions? Quiet group on a Thursday. Well, one of the things that I'll let you know, Ryan, I'll tell you where, but a recording of this webinar is going to be available on Ryan's website, the UWGB Small Business Development Center's website, and we will be emailing it to you. So look for that in the future. Let's see here. When you set up an appointment, how do you not give them all the info? Oh, that's a great one from Michael Whitty. Well, I'll tell you something. If you're the salesperson, this is one of the reasons why I would always argue, have someone who's not your primary salespeople do your cold calling. Because if you have a salesperson do the cold calling, they know all the answers, and they're waiting for permission to sell. And the person on the phone is actually looking for a way to hang up on you. So they'll ask you a question that you think, as a salesperson, is an opportunity to give your pitch. In reality, they're just trying to get enough information to hang up on you. So what I always recommend is, if, for example, we had something on Tuesday, somebody said, I kind of like what you're saying, but what do you charge for this? And I've had that happen to me. Well, as a cold caller, I don't know that much about my clients' businesses. I'm not going to get into those kinds of discussions. So I just say to them, that's a great question, and that's why I want to schedule some time for Joe to come meet with you so that you can ask him those questions directly, and he's really the guy that can give you the answers. And they never push back. They accept that completely. So what I'm saying to you, Michael, is hold back on that information. Focus on the fact that your cold call, the mission of the call, is simply to schedule the appointment. Got another question here. Do you feel that using social media for connections helps the sales process by sending invitations, or do you use it more just for verifying your contact prospects? Well, I think that social media is definitely a method for people to learn about you, especially on LinkedIn. There's no question that whenever you engage in some cold calling activity, people are looking you up. In fact, I can tell you that when I'm talking to somebody on the phone, 9 times out of 10, they're looking at my website or my client's website, and they may even be looking me up on LinkedIn to see who I am. People are very savvy about that kind of thing. But I wouldn't use it in lieu of cold calls. It's a tool that supports your effort, makes you more visible, gives you more credibility, but that's about it. I hope I answered your question. Let's see, we got another one. Do you feel that, yep, I did, I got that. Let's see, I'm trying to see if there's anything else here. Any other questions from everybody? I'm kind of going through the list right now. I think we covered what we've had. What if you are a one-person operation, consultant trainer? How to set up the appointment before sending more information? Well, you can call for yourself. That's doable. It works better if you don't, because it gives you more credibility as the authority or the expert. So when I'm working with consultants, I highly recommend that they consider having someone else do the calling for them. But if you're in a situation where you have to call for yourself, and some of us are, it's better to go ahead and call first. And again, if you focus on just the message, this is the business I'm in, this is the job I do for people, and the purpose of my call is I'm planning to be in your area the week of such and such, and I'd just like to stop and introduce myself, it can be just as effective. And some of us struggle with that, quite frankly. It's a little more difficult for us to do, but it works. And once you do it a couple of times, you get used to it. Any other questions? Well, we're bumping up against the 1:35 time frame, which is when I promised I'd be done with this. So Ryan, I think I'm going to hand it back off to you, my friend. Ryan, are you there? Seem to be having some problems with the audio.
Increase profitability and growth with open book management. And finally, in December of this year, we'll look at some financial and regulatory hotspots for 2014. And you can register for any of these webinars at our website, which is, again, uwgb.edu/sbdc/html/webinars.asp, or go right to our homepage and click Webinars on the left-hand side. So on behalf of First Business Bank, the Wisconsin Small Business Development Center at UW Green Bay, and TMR Associates, I thank you for attending, everyone. Have a good day. Goodbye.
Thanks, Ryan.